My name's Ian Thompson, obviously, and I'm working at Fuzzy Frog currently. And what I wanted to talk to you about was a project that I did way before I started at Fuzzy Frog. And I used to live in Istanbul. And I was talking there to a friend, Volkan his name was, and we were discussing what had gone on in Istanbul. They were actually digging under the Bosphorus and linking the two continents together with a rail network that goes underneath the Bosphorus. And we were just talking about this event and came up with an idea of a little girl who was an archaeologist who would investigate all the treasures and all these things which they were actually discovering underneath the Bosphorus at this time, halting production of the railway. So we got talking about this, and it led to an idea which I then thought, I'm just going to see where I can take this idea because I quite like it. So we decided, okay, let's go for it. So this is a project about that. So why did I choose Lightwave? I mean, we've seen quite a lot of evidence here of how Lightwave can really finesse things and make things look really beautiful. But I'm a little bit like a bull in a china shop, really, with Lightwave. I don't really go into all that stuff. I just want to get in there as an illustrator and learn what I need to do, because it's my idea that I want to get across. And I don't really want to get bogged down by technology and all the nodal editor and all this lot. So I'm kind of like the bad boy, really, of Lightwave, because I don't really care that much about that side of it. All I want to do is I have an idea, and I want to get that idea, and I want to show it to as many people as I can. So it's an easy learning curve with Lightwave. I found it incredibly easy just to pick this up and to go with it. And I mean, okay, I'm an illustrator. I've got a good understanding of anatomy and light and shade, etc. But the modeling, for me, it was extremely easy to pick up the modeling side of things and quickly surface in objects. Sorry, just to go back on that point, in my opinion, creativity does rule. And you shouldn't be held back by the technology. And that's where I think that Lightwave really does excel, because it doesn't hold you back in any way. It allows you to get your ideas out. And we've heard it so many times. And there is a common pattern here developing, as you can see with all the talks, that the community and the forum, it's an excellent resource for anybody wanting to learn. And if you do get stuck on a technical aspect, there's always somebody there to help you. Great third-party support as well for the plugins. We've seen so many of them already and that have been mentioned. But I've highlighted this one here because this is, for me, it's the most important aspect of Lightwave, and it provides me with the ability to explore ideas very quickly. And in particular, a 2D, 3D hybrid workflow, which I tend to use. This is the project that we were looking at, we were talking about, and this is actually one of the is the cover, actually, of the book. And all this was modeled in Lightwave, and but you'll see that it's quite, well, I'd say polished, but it's blended together and sort of softened a lot. And that's all post. I do that in Photoshop, because I get to a point with Lightwave where, okay, I'm happy with the look of it, and then I'll leave Lightwave alone, and then I'll take it and then paint over it, because after all, I kind of like to put my spin on things. So the 3D side of my workflow is blocking out basic forms, basic shapes, looking at environments as well. Obviously, the character models, placing those inside the environments, looking at lighting as well, getting a color palette together, And also, obviously, being able to change, swap camera angles. If a camera angle doesn't quite work well, swap it around quickly. And also the perspective as well. As you know, when you are illustrating, perspective can sometimes be, a pain to get right. So having a camera there and your assets all in place, it's very, very easy then to just quickly swap around, quick render, and you've got a good base to start painting over. The 2D side of my workflow is obviously the concept art at the beginning, which I'll show you just some doodles and sketches that I did at the beginning of this process of Zeno. Color correction and correcting model and render errors, because at the end of the day, it's about speed and getting the ideas out. So sometimes a joint may not flex properly and it'll pop a little bit and you'll get some weird geometry crunching at the elbow. And if you're doing an animation, that's important because you're going to see that straight away. But in illustration, I don't mind because I'll just paint it out, and it's a very quick fix. And also, when I'm looking at texturing, I can use the different brushes in Photoshop, for example, to provide the texture. Yes, I can do it inside of Lightwave. I can actually, place the texture onto the model itself, which I do. But a quicker method is to just use some of the Photoshop brushes and then paint your textures on post. And again, my own style is important in terms of my illustration. So rather than seeing a clean line on the model, the clean the clean light passes that go over the top of it. Obviously, I can soften those and also add some brush strokes as well, just to soften the look of the CG and make it a little bit more child-friendly in this case, as it was a child's book. So I've got some early concepts here. These are really rough, and these were exactly after that conversation with my friend. Then I just sat down and started to rough out some ideas of this girl. Didn't have any clue about anything, what she looked like. It was literally from zero and let's move forward with it. And I started out just roughing out basic ideas. These are really quickly, and there were some here which were really catching my eye in terms of the, I can just show you, no, I can't see that one. The third silhouette where she's reading the book, bending over. This was a really important sketch because it enabled me to start to flesh out the idea more. And I should have mentioned earlier that I started to write the story as well, and from the beginning, and develop the characters in a written format, as well as sort of sketching it alongside that. So these are just some techniques which I use, silhouetting and tonal work. And then I started to sort of flesh out the idea a little bit more. And to the point where I was quite confident now with how she looked, what she did, what her skills were as a character, and I could now take this forwards and start to model. So my early 3D test was this character. And it wasn't the final one that I decided on because it was a little bit sort of pot-bellied and didn't quite look nice. I was going for a bit too cutie on it. But the surfacing on this object is really simple, and it literally is just colored polygons. There's no UV map or anything on here. The head was, I think it was like a simple skin shader inside of Lightwave, and it did help to sort of bring the skin alive a little bit. But there are lots of errors on there, but I'll quickly move on. The next part I want to talk about is the introduction of VPR, the viewport renderer in Lightwave, because this helped my workflow a lot. And what I used to do was, what I did on this was just create one of the scenes from the book. And you can see here that it's a really grainy image. And it was literally just quickly using VPR just to get a very quick idea of the camera angle and some of the objects that were in there, and then just pull that off. That was enough information for me to go ahead and start to work. So I've just got a few of these just to show you how simple it was and how kind of dirty and horrible it looked at this point. But there was enough information, as I said, here to sort of help me along. So this is inside the sort of temple area, and there was a pool at the bottom and some sort of skylight as well. And so I was just investigating really with the camera and just rendering these off. And this was the actual size of them, so I'm not really interested in making a huge, a huge render. They were all really small, and I'll just scale them up because they're already horrible, dirty images anyway. Scaling them doesn't really matter. So now when I take those simple images and then I start painting over them and I start to add those special effects that I was talking about, the glows and the textures and things like that. None of the textures on here were from Lightwave. What you saw previously, the grey ones, were all that was, all Lightwave did. But it does give me quite a lot of information, as I said. So now I can start blocking out the colours and the colour palette of everything. And sort of even some of the details of the graphical symbols on the walls and things like this. Again, quickly changing the perspective around, changing the camera angle, and bringing in actual characters as well, just dropping in the character. And the lighting didn't exist on the left side of the picture. This is all just a glow brush, and then I just paint that light in on the side of the character. But it's enough to convince and to get that idea across of the environment, etc. This is one of the villains in the book, and again, it's a first attempt at the model of him, but easily dropping him in and seeing how his character and the colours of his costume work in this environment as well. There's no lighting in here apart from the pool area and the skylight. The bluish light that you can see on there is just a glow brush as well, just a quick wash over with a brush, and then just paint in some of that blue as well. So what I've done here is I've just sort of showed you like a build-up of it. So I start off here with this simple thing. If you notice, it's all faceted. I don't really care at this point. And then I'll add the character in there, quickly pose the character using IK Boost, which I'll show you later on. And then just add the texture and the color, etc. on the top. And this was just my first pass at this. This was just really quickly going over these. And you can see the brush strokes on the, sorry, I'm pointing at the screen and you can't see. But you can see the brush strokes on the pillar at the side there. Again, another one. I've got this lighting in the corner here just to give that light. But it's actually a light which is going to be used for the torch that she's holding. So it gives me that, if I just flick back there, you can see I've got the nice shadow between the eyes, etc. But that was sort of pre-organizing my thoughts as to, yes, she's going to have a torch, fire stick in her hand of some kind, so I'll need a light source coming from that direction. She isn't actually holding on to anything. I knew there was going to be a door in there, I just didn't bother putting it in. So that gives me enough information there to carry on and then to produce that. And then a quick alternative camera angle. You can see how rough and ready it really is. It's literally just dots for the fire and just building it up using a dodge brush on there. So next passes I was making, I changed the character a bit, and I'll show you the model in the demo. I changed the character around a bit, and these were more polished images. Again, using the same assets that I'll show you, but taking it into, I used Photoshop as well as Coral Painter for this, because Coral Painter's got a really nice set of blending tools which help me to erase a lot of the mistakes in the model, and also to get the nice stone look on the floor as well. You can see on the side the dog. I didn't render any fur on the dog at all, that it was just like a flat shaded, and the fur was all added in post as well. But the light source and everything, it gives me the good light source to carry on, and gives me those sort of visual clues that I need to finish the painting and to make those adjustments and put my spin on it. These were two of the bad guys. Sort of an outdoor shot. And this was the digging under the under the Bosphorus, I suppose. This was inspiration. These are the same three characters. Obviously, I can get away with just using one character and then paint over, put weight on the character, put a moustache on him, whatever, and change him around. So now I'll go in and show you some of the assets that I created for this. So I'll start off with the rock. And when I was doing this, I was literally, sorry, I'll just have to find these now because so this is one of the rock assets, and it was the only rock that I created for the whole of it, and I just kept reusing it over and over again. And one of the reasons I could do that was because the way that I made it, I was able to, I am a Mac user and I still can't do it, okay. That I modeled this in such a way that I could get different looks at it from different angles. So this angle, for example, is a lot different. I'll just make it bigger like that. So this angle here, I've got a very different shape than if I turn it this way, and I've got a nice flat surface, you know, and I can just move this around and use the same asset over and over again. You'll notice there's lots of non-planar polys in there, and it's a really dirty model, but it gets the job done. And if you look at the model, I mean, this was actually just a retopoed, quick sculpt in 3D coat, which is another app that I tend to use these days. And yeah, if I just turn the wireframe on, you can see, I mean, I haven't even done any modeling. I've just used an auto retopo on it. So you can see the mesh is quite untidy as a mesh, and quite a lot of polygons in there. And another thing down here in Lightwave, you've got your grid system, and you'll notice that all my objects are like scaled incorrectly because I just, you know, I don't want it to slow me down, and so I just get moving, model those things in there, and then move on. So let's go here. I'll show a plinth object. So you can see the plinth. It's right in here. So you can see my issue with scale. Right. There we go. And that's why you have problems with scale, because now, hey, yeah. But that was just painted in 3D coat, imported. Again, you can see where you're not going to see it. I don't really care what it looks like. But you saw that in the previous artwork. And And here's the bridge tower. Another asset that was made. So these things very quick to make and a good reference point for me to start to draw over. So if I just go back now, which one? And I'll just show you what some of the character models that I made. Character model. So this is Omo, one of the bad guys. Again, the texturing on there, the only thing that has been UV'd on here is just the head. The rest of it is just standard, just a colour, really, that's all. And the great thing about this, I'll just show you the wireframe on there. It's really simple, it's just a sub-patched object, sub-deep object, sorry. And yeah, very quick to make. The head, I tend to do a little bit more work on the actual head because that is obviously an important aspect of the character. But yeah, a lot of the assets are really just very quick. And also, it also helps when it comes to rigging them to keep the geometry quite simple. So the other object character is Zeno herself. Oops. This was the model that I sort of used for my final shots. Again, and a lot of the things, it's the same backpack as the other one. It's just been, swished and moved around a little bit, and the colour changed on there. So I'm just trying to always keep things as easy as possible, and so I can sort of maintain control, and it doesn't get to a point where it overcomplicates and starts to slow me down in terms of what I want to produce. Okay, so what I'll show you now is this model, and I used to use a thing called IK Boost, which is a great little tool inside of Lightwave. And obviously now, as Lino's talked about earlier, we've got Genoma in there, which kind of does this in a much better way. So if I just open up my scene. This one. So the reason I used IK Boost is because it was a really simple way of actually rigging. I couldn't really get my head around how to rig characters properly. It was quite complicated, and the best tool that I could do to use was IK Boost, because all I needed to do really was just place the bones at the relative parts. You can see the bones here. And I was pretty much good to go. There's some parameters which you have to set in terms of, stopping the IK chain at the shoulders and at the hips, but very simple and easy to do. And so if I just go to IK Boost down here, and I can just then use these handles which I created, and then I can start to deform this object quite easily. And it's a very, very easy way of getting very fast poses and positioning your characters into shots. There's a little bit of eye movement on there as well. But yeah, this is one of the tools that I use. And I think it's still a really good, valuable tool, and it does work well with Genoma as well, doesn't it? Yeah.
And it's nice.
Yeah.
For quick stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and you can also sort of save the poses as well with this. So once you've got a pose that you really like, you can quickly just go down to the go down here and right-click on here, and you can load a pose, etc., and save a pose and reuse those later on. So again, it really helps to speed your workflow up. So the final few things that I just want to show you are some of the scenes and the assets that I created for the scene. So I'll load those up now quickly. And there's two scenes, and I'll show you this one first. Before I worked at Fuzzy Frog, my UV mapping and everything was really, really bad, and my optimization and workflow was terrible as well. Simon was pulling his hair out when I first went there, because like my UV maps were like nearly 60 to 100 megabytes when they should have been compressed to a game resolution. Okay, so I'm learning as I go. But here we've got some things. Some of the assets placed inside the other assets. So I'll just zoom out, and you can see one of the assets there. So this is just one actual one quarter, just repeated and looped around. So I've got the skylight there from my concept, and the pool at the bottom, and I've got this sort of stonework in there, and you can see my camera angle over here. And that was a door. My camera here, which I can sort of move around and pick my shot quite easily. So at this stage, though, I was pretty much sort of set on what this temple looked like. So all that, the black and white imagery that you saw earlier was kind of all done and dusted at that point, and I knew where I was going with this now. So that's one of the assets there, and obviously just placing the character in there was really easy. And I've got that posed character which I can load, and I can load the different poses onto this character and move her anywhere in this scene that I like. And the final thing that I'd like to show you is the tunnel scene with the digging machine that we saw earlier. And what I'll do here is, I'll show you that one first. And this is using that same rock that I showed you earlier, and using the instancer inside of Lightwave just to sort of make the inside of this tunnel more rustic, more sort of as if it's just been drilled. So you can see there that I can regulate the size of that same asset, and then so I've got large boulders on the top and just small pebbles on the bottom as well. Quite complicated, probably much more efficient way of doing this than I did it, but it got the job done. So what I would do at this stage is quickly open up the VPR. I'll just expand this. And you can see those rocks all scattered around there. I actually have a lot more of them. I just kind of, because I was going to present on my laptop and it can't handle that density. But you can see I've got enough information there. Even if I did, wanted to just clone these objects even more, maybe I didn't have enough rocks, and I can clone them and then fill in this background or areas which are sort of less densely populated with rocks, and I can easily fill those in post. So that, as they say, is that. Is there any questions? Yeah. Yes. Is there any plan to do an animation? We were going to do an animation with it. I did actually have an animatic here as well, just talking about. Sorry. I don't know if I've still got it on this. And there was going to be a sort of animation in it. Yeah, I'm really sorry about this. It's a really bad animatic, but again, it just shows how some of the assets can be reused, and combining them with paint, with sort of traditional methods. So this was Zeno's mum and dad. None of the text is important. And it literally is just cutting up drawings and then just sort of moving the camera around a little bit, just to give it a little bit of life and things like this. But once we go into the scene where we see Zeno now, you'll recognize some of those assets again. So I can quickly just use those. So in answer to your question, yes, there was a plan to create the animation, and this was the animatic for that, but we kind of just didn't really have enough time or budget to sort of do that. I don't know if you want to watch this, or shall I just stop it? Good excuse for a drink. Yeah, so I was really just roughing this out at this stage, just to sort of get an idea of how the story would go in the animation.
If we have other questions.
Yeah.
Is this released in Turkey?
No, we're still working on this because, although the illustration and the artwork and that is all very good, the story is the king, and we've still got to work on the story because there's some.
Bring out the comic form.
Pardon?
You bring it out in the comic form.
Yes, yeah.
I think it's very valid because at this point in time, that and you being an ex-Istanbuli, there's some problems with people not looking after the heritage.
Yes.
And there is a definite problem with the wanton, blatant, terrible misuse of Byzantine architecture. So if you have something like this to come out to teach the children
That is exactly.
heritage,
Yeah.
Great Hall,
That was.
would be very invalid.
That was exactly the reason, actually, why we were doing it, why we wanted to do that, because it was, for example, when they were going underneath the Bosphorus and they were finding all these fantastic artifacts and things, the president was kind of the opinion, what's this rubbish? We need to get moving on this thing, get going, and trying to get people to move on. And he was up in arms because production and the actual thing had been stopped. So this was an attempt to try and educate kids. Right. Look at the treasures that you've got in your country, and this was a character in a way to try and bring that home to them, that the country you live in is such a fantastic part of the world and has been for many, many centuries that you're losing a lot here. So read books and read history.
Very, very true. Because recently, without going too political, people have been talking about putting Saint Sophia back into an active mosque and taking it to museum heritage which I find really, really sad.
Yeah.
Say here, but well done for doing it. I think it's honourable.
Thanks. Is there any more questions? Or?
What's the final format? Is it printed? Is it ebook?
Well, the plan is to actually produce a book, but we are toying with the idea of doing sort of an online comic on the iPad and make it a little bit interactive as well. We're still kind of deciding which way to go with it. As I said, everything gets put on hold because if the story's not there and it's not an enjoyable book in terms of reading, it kind of defeats the object, because at the end of the day, then we just left with pretty pictures which mean nothing. So we have to get a story up to scratch, really. So that's why it's a work in progress. Yeah.
What's the rigging software that you used, and why is it better than Genova?
Sorry.
Easier than
It's not a software. It's actually inside of it's inside of Lightwave. It's called IK Boost.
Oh, is it an external plugin? Or
No, it's actually inside the program itself. So it's just one of the tools. I can't remember where it was now, but
It's version 8.
yeah. And it's just a very, very fast way to rig a character. You do need a couple of weight maps and things on there to help us along, but it's a very fast way of doing it. Okay. Thank you.